I've been consistently in favor of preserving the voting rights that we have, and basically every session of the legislature, this legislature has attempted to restrict them, and the governor has supported that, and I think that's a mistake.
What do you do about that as governor? Is there anything you could do about that as governor?
There is. First of all, you can be an advocate for it. You can be a leader and speak out about it. One of the things that even at a county level that we did was when these lawsuits were proceeding in federal court. I think there was one other county maybe that filed an amicus brief, but we were about the only county that filed an amicus brief. So you engage as much as you can in the legal system itself. When there were provisions that would have restricted some voting rights in the legislature, the governor should have vetoed them. And he can also, if he wants to take his own party on an issue, that would be a great issue for him to start advocating and saying the Republican Party, which at some point in its history has had a good record on civil rights, is ruining that legacy by violating the Voting Rights Act, which is how it was found that they were conducting themselves 5 times until the most recent ruling by the Supreme Court. Yes, sir.
Wayne County was named the #1 micropolitan area in the nation. Why should anybody dare vote for change when things are going so?
Well, they've been doing well for a while, and they've been doing pretty well. They were doing pretty well under Governor Strickland comparatively too. The question is the same thing that I would say to an individual if somebody said, well, if I'm personally doing well, why would I care, for instance, that 1 out of 4 children in Ohio have some issues with food security? If I'm being well fed, why does it matter to me? And I would just say that if this state is going to survive, it's going to and thrive, it isn't going to be because there are individual communities that are doing okay. It's going to be because the state as a whole is starting to move forward. And the other thing that Wayne County would have to look at is, why are they doing well? Are they doing well because the governor cut $500 million plus out of education? Are they doing well because he instituted policies that have devastated clean and renewable energy in the state? Are they doing well because he cut 50% of the local government fund? I mean, you have to have a cause and effect of why. Look, we have wealthy communities and thriving communities in this state, and we always have. But we have to look at, are these policies really as a whole in our best interest? And this is an election for governor of the whole state. And there have always been communities that have done well, and some of them will do well whether there's a Republican governor or a Democratic governor. But the question is, what makes sense, not just for someone individually or for a small subset of the state, but is the state moving forward as a whole? I don't think that it is.
Well, some of the things I read or have heard here recently is that I've heard that Ohio's in the top 10% in job creation, and you're saying it's 22 months been below the average. So where do your figures come from?
My figures come from academic institutions, and we can provide you those later. Look, that's also from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The Kasich administration, and I'll try to be kind, has used statistics selectively. Let me put it this way. There have been months, for instance, where we were below the national average in terms of job creation, and the Kasich administration in his campaign would put out a statement saying that we were in the top 10 or 15 in terms of total numbers of jobs created in the state or in the country. Now, how do you balance those two things? Well, because they're using raw numbers. We're one of the biggest states in the country. They've literally used that as a yardstick for themselves. if we're the one of the largest states in the country, that means when we lose jobs, we're always going to be one of the biggest job losers, and when we gain jobs, we're always going to be one of the biggest. So the question is, how are you doing per capita? I'll give you an example. In the month of July, we lost more jobs than any other state in the country. Well, we're not the biggest state in the country. So we didn't lose the most per capita. We lost, in raw numbers, we lost more jobs than any state in the country. In the month of August, we gained, I think, a net total of 200 jobs. Well, obviously, if you start figuring out per capita, that basically means you have no job growth whatsoever. But there are, it's just one of those things where we try to point it out as honestly as we can, and we just have to rely on journalists like yourselves to be able to winnow the facts and put these things into perspective. But as I said before, the entire country has added jobs. The question is, have we added more jobs per capita than other states? And the answer to that is it's really not up for debate. We have not. And there's also a national, and these you can get this information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is not a partisan organization. It's not a political claim. The most respected economists in Ohio have repeated this information. Probably the most respected expert in Ohio in terms of employment issues is a guy out of Cleveland State University named George Zeller. He reports this every month like clockwork. We have had 22 months in a row where we've been below the national average. Look, let's just talk practically about politics, though. Governor Kasich knows that if he just keeps saying, well, we lost 400,000 jobs under Ted Strickland, and we've gained 250,000 jobs under my administration, that must mean I'm doing a great job. And that argument only prevails if we only have a superficial evaluation of that. If people don't say, well, wait a minute, didn't every single state lose jobs during the recession, and didn't every single state gain them back? 250,000 jobs is not a lot of jobs in Ohio. It's not a lot of jobs in California. It would be a lot of jobs in Delaware, but we're smart enough to realize we've got 11 million people in this state, and we're capable of doing that kind of analysis. He doesn't want that kind of analysis. It's one of the reasons he doesn't want to have a debate about anything. We've had 7 or 8 different offers to both campaigns to have a debate about substantive issues, and we accepted all of them. The governor won't accept any of them, and I think part of the reason is because his numbers do not withstand scrutiny. They just don't.
You're talking about that the jobs numbers don't equate with he's providing. But you talked about the economic policy, your economic development fund being similar to Jobs Ohio. What are you going to do to create jobs?
It's similar in terms of mission and scale. So one of the things I haven't criticized Governor Kasich about is I didn't object to the fact that he created a large economic development fund and set ambitious goals for it, because we did the same thing in my county. So we set up a $100 million fund, and the difference is that we spend the money transparently, and secondly, which is important, because if you don't spend the money transparently, you just have less accountability, and I think you end up making more foolish choices in the long run. But secondly, we've had much more of a focus on small business development than Jobs Ohio has. Now, one of the nice things about running for governor, I've really gotten to know a lot of communities in Ohio. I've been in all 88 counties, most of them more than once. I've talked to a lot of local businessmen, a lot of Chamber of Commerce folks, a lot of township trustees, local mayors. Almost none of them have stories about Jobs Ohio coming to them and saying, how can we work with your local communities? What are your local growth sectors, and how can we help out with that? Now, in contrast to that, in my county, what we did was, when we took that $100 million, we reserved a large percentage of it for small businesses. And we also made very strict requirements that if we were going to give assistance to a corporation, whether it's a big corporation or a medium-sized corporation or a small corporation, that they would be required to create jobs that paid a decent wage in return for that help. And if they didn't, they would be forfeiting their funds. The state has done, I think, a very substandard job in that they have given money out to certain companies that didn't create any jobs at all. They've given money out to companies that sometimes actually reduce the number of jobs, and they've given money out to companies that sometimes paid barely better than a minimum wage, and I think those are bad investments.
Maybe you did okay on American Greetings?
American Greetings added, laid people off.
What would you have done differently?
I don't think that, you know, I had discussions with American Greetings is a great example. I mean, to explain that, it might take more time than I might have here today, but you had a local company that was located in a middle-class community called Brooklyn, Ohio. They wanted to move their headquarters a few miles away to one of the wealthiest suburbs in Cuyahoga County, where they own land, and they basically just said, if the state